Welcome to Crossroads. In today's episode, we'll be talking about how special counsel Jack Smith is being accused of possibly being illegitimately appointed to his role. If this is actually happening, it means that Smith is, quote, not clothed in the authority of the federal government, and frankly, everything he's done may in fact be illegitimate. We'll see how this all goes. Also, Donald Trump's opponents are warning against an attempt to remove him from the 2024 ballots. They're basically saying that, you know what, even if they don't support Trump, the move to remove him from the ballots could backfire, it seems, on the Democrats because it undermines, ironically, democracy. Also, tonight we're going to have a special report on the CCP's hidden hand that's going to be premiering 7 p.m. Eastern Time only on Epoch TV, so be sure to tune in for that. That said, let me show you this. Right now, special counsel Jack Smith is, asking the Supreme Court to rapidly accept a case to determine whether President Donald Trump had executive privilege at the time of his charges. And in doing so, Jack Smith, the special counsel, wants to bypass the appeals process while Trump's legal team has argued that rulings from the appeals courts are necessary, which I'd say they are. Now, many of the cases against Trump are on temporary hold until this whole determination happens, and the legal process is very likely right now going to delay the Trump charges until after the 2024 elections, meaning this whole thing will probably no longer affect the elections, which may be why they're trying to remove him from the ballots. So, just recently, December 22nd, just before Christmas, the Supreme Court actually made a determination on this, and they decided to not fast-track the DOJ cases. But now, other issues are coming up that could seriously impact the DOJ and the authority of the special counsel. Just the News says this. They say former U.S. Attorney General Edwin Meese and top constitutional law scholars are now asking the Supreme Court to reject special counsel Jack Smith's petition in the case against former President Donald Trump because they say Smith's appointment as special counsel is unconstitutional to begin with. Now, briefly on this, just to clarify, the Supreme Court has already turned down Jack Smith's request to bypass the appeals process to fast-track the determination on whether or not Donald Trump had executive privilege. That whole process now is going to have to go through the entire appeals courts, and that's very likely not going to happen, where it goes to the Supreme Court for the final determination until after the election. But regardless of this, during this process, ironically, where Jack Smith made the request, which has again been turned down, they're now raising the issue that Jack Smith himself may not actually have a legal role as special counsel. And they're also calling into question some of his powers. Now, Just the News says in a voluntary brief filed Wednesday in support of neither Trump nor Smith, the legal experts asked the Supreme Court to dismiss Smith's request for the High Court to rule on whether former President Donald Trump had immunity from prosecution on charges that he allegedly worked to overturn the 2020 election. Because why? Well, it says this. Jack Smith lacked the authority to ask the Supreme Court to rule on the case, according to a 32-page brief written by Meese, Boston University Associate Law School Dean, that's Gary Lawson, and Northwestern University Law School Professor Stephen Calabresi. Now, here's some more on it just to kind of outline what's happening right now. ABA Journal said this. It says Smith, who was not nominated to the special counsel by President Joe Biden or confirmed by the U.S. Senate, and this is going to be important, it says that Smith has nationwide jurisdiction, making him more powerful than that of any of the 93 Senate-confirmed U.S. attorneys, Calabresi said. It says federal law allows the attorneys general to appoint attorneys to assist U.S. attorneys, but not replace them, he wrote, suggesting that Jack Smith, the power he believes he has, or the power he's been given really by the Biden administration, is not actually within the powers normally granted or legally granted to a special counsel. He's overstepping the boundaries of what he can legally do according to them. Now, let me show you this, because This is from the official report on the U.S. Supreme Court's website. This is the actual document, and they're explaining the technicalities of it. And they say this. They say, not clothed in the authority of the federal government, Smith is a modern example of the naked emperor. Improperly appointed, he has no more authority to represent the United States in this court than Bryce Harper, Taylor Swift, or Jeff Bezos, suggesting again that Jack Smith is just a normal citizen who is somehow acting like he has power of the federal government when he does not. And they continue stating, the fact is sufficient to sink Smith's petition, and the court should deny review, which notably they have. They say, we express no views on the merits issues addressed in Smith's unauthorized petition. So not getting involved in the technicalities of what he's demanding. Now, this is notably one of the main arguments used to not accept Jack Smith's petition to have Trump's case, rush past the Supreme Court's, which again the Supreme Court has already determined it's not going to do. Trump's case on, presidential immunity, executive privilege, that's going to be delayed now, very likely until after the elections take place, meaning the Jack Smith special counsel and its grand juries and so on are no longer, very likely, at least not legally, going to be able to impact the 2024 elections. And we're waiting now, of course, on the Colorado case still. There's been no major updates on that in terms of whether the Supreme Court's going to take it up. And notably, they did it right before Christmas when the Supreme Court is out, so interesting timing they chose on that. And also there's going to be some other cases determining even the legalities of some of the J6 charges. All of this could potentially overturn even the basis of Jack Smith's investigation. But there's actually more to it. Now remember, Trump is arguing that he had presidential immunity. He was president of the United States. And his criminal charges, again, are on pause until that goes through the appeals process. But that process, again, is not going to be able to impact the 2024 elections unless the Biden administration finds a way to change that. And Jack Smith, of course, was trying to rush it through. But now, again, Jack Smith's basic authority, and not only that, but even his legitimacy, are now being called into question. Now, this would basically mean that Smith, again, is just a private citizen. He lacks standing in the Supreme Court because of this. He has no power. But there's something else that's probably even bigger than this. There are also allegations that since Jack Smith issued his grand jury indictment against Donald Trump, notably, it turns out, before he completed his oath to office, that Smith is allegedly that he completed signing his oath to office on September 14th, 2023. That was 298 days after taking up his position. And under the law, which allegedly says you need to file the oath of office within 30 days of assuming office, that means possibly that Jack Smith filed his charges against Donald Trump and did the whole grand jury indictment when he was not legally in his position. Again, he waited 298 days before he took his oath to office, meaning he had an official authority. Now, that's under 5 U.S. Code 3332, for those of you curious. And there's also probably even more than this, it seems. Donald Trump has regarded special counsel Jack Smith along these lines from the get-go. Remember what Trump said shortly after Attorney General Merrick Garland appointed Jack Smith. Going back to 2022, November, Trump said this. Fox News said that former President Donald Trump blasted the Justice Department's appointment of a special counsel to take over investigations related to presidential records in January 6, telling Fox News he won't partake in it. And he called it the worst politicization of justice in our country, while urging the Republican Party to take action. Trump said this. He said, I have been going through this for 6 years, which he has, or longer now. For 6 years, I've been going through this, and I'm not going to go through it anymore. Now, Trump continued by stating, and I hope the Republicans have the courage to fight this. He says, I have been proven innocent for 6 years on everything, from fake impeachments to former special counsel Robert Mueller, who found no collusion, and now I have to do it more? It is not acceptable. It is so unfair. It is so political. And there's even more to it now. Trump is lodging an appeal now for the 2020 election case. And this is going to be interesting. Now, back to where things are at currently. Now, remember, Trump and his legal team are pushing to have the appeals courts, move through the normal legal process. This is mostly done right now. So far, it looks like the Supreme Court is going to not take up the case immediately. It's going to have to go through the entire thing. But there were some real issues with this. Epoch Times said that as ordered by the court, former President Donald Trump and his lawyers filed their opening brief with the District Columbia Appeals Court, and they asked the court to toss the DOJ's case, and they're accusing where Trump is accused of plotting to overturn the 2020 election on grounds of, presidential immunity. It says the U.S. District Court of Appeals, because remember now, it is going through the appeals process. This is for the U.S. District Court of Columbia Circuit, previously agreed to expedite the hotly contested case, giving the appellants until December 23rd to file their opening arguments for the appeal. Again, this is now going through. Supreme Court determined it's not going to go through this. But it notes the filing comes after the U.S. Supreme Court had already decided not fast-track the case. So again, we'll see what happens with the appellate courts. And Smith, of course, who has sought to adhere to the March 4th trial deadline, he wanted to have it rushed. It says the result of the appeals will decide whether the DOJ's case against Trump has teeth, suggesting that not only now will it have to go through this appellate court, but it will even determine whether, Jack Smith is going to even have any impact if this whole thing goes forward. And notes it will also contribute to determining whether the politically charged case will be heard in the first place. If the trial goes ahead, President Trump would be required to appear in Washington District Court every weekday for 2 or 3 months. And notably, remember, Trump's trying to campaign for president right now. Even though it would go through this process, this would seriously disrupt his ability to, campaign and so on. There's going to be a big question hanging over all this now. If this is not going to be able to happen before the 2024 elections, if the whole thing is off the table for that, can Trump delay that process until after the 2024 elections anyways, this whole appeals process, because he could argue that this would, of course, interfere with his ability to run for president. Now, it continues saying that a 1982 Supreme Court opinion had established absolute immunity for presidents from civil suits. For criminal prosecution, both parties have argued that the bounds of immunity have not been defined. So we'll have to see where they determine all this. Now, before we get to the next topic, again, briefly, folks, my special report on the CCP's hidden hand is going to premiere tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Epoch TV. So be sure to join me for that. There's a link in the description below. And let me show you the trailer for that special feature airing tonight. Let me show you now. The Chinese Communist Party uses bribery, blackmail, economic threats, and outright subversion to quietly seize control of other nations. While the CCP threatens to invade Taiwan using military force, well, the communist regime is already invading other nations, only it's not being done with troops and bombs. Instead, it's being done with non-military tactics. And South Korea has been an active target of the Chinese Communist Party in this lesser-known form of war. Now again, that's going to be airing tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, only on Epoch TV. And of course, the focus is on what's happening with the CCP's, let's say, hidden hand in South Korea. But what they're doing there is relevant to the same tactics they use everywhere. The same stuff they're doing there, they do in a lot of other places. And so South Korea has become kind of a microcosm of how the CCP's operations work to control organizations. So don't miss it. 7 p.m. Eastern Time tonight, only on Epoch TV. Now, we've been talking a lot about the attacks on Donald Trump, and there are a lot of them. A lot of them are possibly off the table for now. And, maybe if Trump loses the 2024 election, of course, he's going to have to face all of that still. If Trump does not win against Joe Biden, he's probably going to have to face still all those charges from Jack Smith, that entire process, and who knows what's going to happen to him. If he wins and becomes president, well, it's a different story. He could probably pardon himself for most of that, or just, take other actions. We'll see where it goes, but Trump's pretty much on the line right now. The big part is that I think at the current time, though, is this. None of this is going to be able to interfere with the 2024 elections, other than Trump having to appear in court and having that very likely interfere with his ability to campaign. But the next big story is, of course, what the Democrats are doing to, let's say, just remove Trump from the ballot entirely. We've been talking a lot about, they've tried everything. They've tried charging with just about every crime imaginable, the worst ones you can think of, other than maybe murder. And here we are now. The question was, well, what are they going to do next? Well, the answer is try to remove Donald Trump from the ballots entirely and make it so that Donald Trump cannot even run for president. We talked about the Colorado case. Remember, the Colorado Supreme Court is trying to disqualify Trump from the state's primary ballots for the upcoming presidential elections. The case is going to head to the Supreme Court, hopefully, we'll see, for a decision on this. The Supreme Court was given a very narrow window to make it, to make the determination of whether it will take that case up, again, by the 4th of next month. And if it does not take it up by then, it means that the Colorado is going to just remove Trump from the ballots. And even if you write in Trump's name, if you do a write-in vote, your vote will not be counted. But this case even has Trump's opponents, people who don't like Trump. They're now criticizing it, actually. They think it's an assault on democracy. They think it's terrible. And many of them even think it's to help Donald Trump in the end, because it's probably not going to hold up. Let me show you. This is former U.S. Attorney General Bill Barr talking about the Colorado case. Watch.
I hope the court has to smack this down very quickly. I think the legal argument here for it is ridiculous. And I think even more importantly, it is highly destructive. And it's exactly the kind of tactics by the left that created Donald Trump in the first place. They're sort of anything goes tactics that created Trump in the first place, and that continue to breathe life into him.
Now, look, I should briefly emphasize, Bill Barr is not a fan of Donald Trump. Yes, he worked in the Trump administration, but this is the same Bill Barr who was issuing serious warnings over what he believes a second term in office for Trump would mean. Just to emphasize Bill Barr's stance on Trump, Daily Mail said that Trump's former Attorney General Bill Barr revealed a chilling prediction of what would happen if ex-President Trump is reelected amid fears staff would be unable to say no during his quote-unquote nothing to lose second term. Bill Barr is framing Donald Trump as a threat against the entire government, essentially. Bill Barr is not a fan of Donald Trump. But Bill Barr, in that video just now, he is criticizing the Colorado Supreme Court for trying to remove Trump from the ballot because, ironically, he's saying that what Colorado is doing is, interestingly, justifying Trump's narratives. Donald Trump has been claiming this narrative that, the federal government has an issue of corruption. He's been talking about draining the swamp for years, that he wants to get rid of this, deep state that is able to do these things. He's talked about weaponization of justice. The left denies these things exist. They deny this is a problem. But by, ironically, using those powers against Trump, it's at the very least creating the image that Trump is right about all of it. And the American people are probably going to vote for him, as Bill Barr notes, because they're seeing the legitimate carrying out of the actions that Trump is warning exist. He's saying that, again, Donald Trump was voted in last time mainly based on these narratives, and by ironically justifying the narratives, the Colorado Supreme Court is going to win votes for Trump rather than actually harm him in the end. That's the argument, at least. Even California Governor Gavin Newsom, folks, Gavin Newsom is criticizing the decision from the Colorado Supreme Court. The New York Post has him saying that there is no doubt that Donald Trump is a threat to our liberties and even to our democracy. Threat to our democracy while they get rid of your right to vote. But again, Newsom continues by saying, But in California, we defeat candidates at the polls. Everything else is a political distraction. Now, remember, in California, this is an important statement, because the Soros-backed lieutenant governor in California was asking the state to look for every possible legal option to remove Donald Trump from the 2024 ballots. And it looks like Newsom, the governor of California, is against the agenda. California probably is not going to follow in the footsteps of Colorado on this. But my personal take on it, remember that Gavin Newsom allegedly wants to run as president. He's the Democrat presidential candidate in waiting if Biden doesn't stay in the race. And it's interesting to see that Gavin Newsom looks like he's been trying to frame himself as being more of a political moderate. He's not coming out as, the far left or whatever like that, or at least not on paper. Sorry, at least not on camera. I think on paper it's a different story. He's trying to frame himself as not taking a hard stance on these things. And again, it looks like California may not follow in the footsteps of Colorado. But the important part with this is it actually doesn't matter. Whatever the Supreme Court decides with the Colorado case is going to impact the vote for the entire country. If the Supreme Court rules in favor of the Colorado Supreme Court, again, the state court versus the U.S. court, if the Supreme Court makes a ruling in favor of what the Colorado Supreme Court has done to remove Trump from the ballot, that will very likely become the law throughout the entire country. And if they determine, Donald Trump, insurrection, he's off the ballot, that means Donald Trump is out of the race. He can never run for office ever again, and that's the end of it. If the Supreme Court makes the determination on the other side that no, you cannot remove Donald Trump from the ballot, that's going to make the determination throughout the entire country. And so during this interim stage, it really doesn't matter much if other states join in. My personal take on it, I was talking to some friends about this actually, trying to figure it out. My personal take is this. The Supreme Court is very likely going to look not only at the technicalities of the law with, it's again Article 15, Section 3 of the U.S. Constitution that they're using to try to push Trump off the ballot. The whole narrative is that if an officer of the federal government, engages in insurrection or gives material comfort or aid or whatever else to people engaged in it, then that individual can never again hold office. There's been arguments, and again, lower courts have already made this determination, that does not apply to presidents. In fact, it may not even apply to members of the Senate or members of Congress. It's very limited in some regards. But again, the big case is not going to be just on that. The big case for the Supreme Court is also going to be the impact on the country. Republicans are playing an interesting game right now. Republicans now are talking about removing Joe Biden from the ballots because of his failure to secure the border and allow for a foreign invasion that is causing, states of emergency all throughout the country. That the government has become delinquent on one of its core basic functions, which is securing our borders. And because of that, they talked about removing Biden from the ballots. Now, look, you might remember I said last week, I was like, I think it's kind of not a smart move by the Republicans to be doing this because, frankly, the Colorado case is making the Democrats look bad. It's making them look like they're trying to overthrow the American, system of our ability to vote for our leaders, the representative democracy that is the basis of a republic. And Democrats, by doing this, they're breaking their whole narrative, claiming that Donald Trump is a threat to democracy if they themselves are destroying the democratic process. You know what I mean? But it's an interesting move because of this. If you have it in the United States where Republican states are removing Joe Biden from the ballot and Democrat states are removing Trump from the ballot, it's going to divide the American Union. And if the Supreme Court has to take that into account, that the American Union itself is under threat, and the American system of elections is under threat, then they may take that into account in their ruling. And actually, I think that's what some Republicans are, hoping for in terms of their actions to, say they want to remove Biden from the ballots. Now, there's more to this, of course, as well. As the establishment is trying to push Trump out of the race, it's having an impact also outside of the U.S. Other countries are questioning the basic integrity of the United States now. Remember, America, even if Americans don't think of ourselves like this, and a lot of us frankly don't really care or necessarily like this, America is the world leader. Americans, again, we're in an odd state with this. We were kind of thrust into this position after World War II. I think Americans, we never really anticipated this. We never really aimed for it. But America is the world leader. It has accomplished what, the conquerors of every conqueror in the past has tried to do, from Napoleon to Alexander the Great to Attila the Hun. And America, interestingly, has taken a very unique stance with that, one that I don't think has existed in empires in the past, which is America doesn't really ask of really anything from the countries that look to it as its leader. If anything, we actually give a lot to them with really nothing in return oftentimes. But, of course, America represents a certain type of system for the world, the Pax Americana, the peace under America. It's the concept that people are endowed with God-given rights, and the role of government is merely to protect those rights. The government is subservient to the people, not the other way around. Because remember, throughout most of history, it was the opposite. The people served the government, not the government serving the people. The American idea is, again, based not only on the idea of what the place of government is, but also on the concept that people are endowed with basic rights. And America's role in defending the rights of the average person represent the system of international peace that America has established. This has defined the last, 100 years plus of our world. And the relative peace compared to, we've had wars, but look at the rest of human history. The relative peace that has existed under the Pax Americana, the peace under America, is now under threat. President of El Salvador, he's raising concerns right now over what it means if the Democrats try to remove Trump from the 2024 ballots. And he said this on X. He said the United States has lost its ability to lecture any other country about democracy. And that's serious. If America no longer has the ability to lecture other countries on rigging elections, if America no longer has the ability of lecturing other countries on, threats to democracy and of pushing their, let's say imprisoning their political enemies, Russia does it, a lot of countries in Latin America do it, a lot of, Arab countries do it. America, because Biden and his administration are carrying out these things, at the very least he's allowing it to happen. If America continues on this track, we will lose the moral high ground to be able to uphold these principles globally. Now, interestingly as well, we'll see where this goes. I think that it's not only a threat to, democracy at this point, it's not only a threat to the American system whereby we elect our leaders, not only a threat to, I think, the basic fabric and, harmony of this country, it's becoming a threat now to the American Union itself and the place of the United States internationally. The case in Colorado is going to have very broad implications for what America is. Now, that said, you're also seeing a lot of interesting shifts taking place around the world. Argentina right now, switching topics a bit, they have a new solution if protesters want to block roads. Now, look, you might have seen the videos in Germany and the US and so on. You have oftentimes climate protesters gluing their hands to tarmacs, gluing their hands to roads. They have to cut part of the road out alongside their hand in order to get them off. You might have seen the videos of the pro-Palestine protesters, notably who are mostly groups like Liberation Socialists and Democratic Socialists of America, the same groups notably behind BLM, just pulling up a new agenda and claiming to represent something they never really have before. But those individuals are blocking roads and blocking freeways and standing in people's way and disrupting the basic livelihood and ability to go to their jobs of the average American. While it's not just in America we're seeing this, in Latin America they have it too, and the same tactics are at play. And Argentina has a new solution for them. If you block the roads, they're going to take away your welfare checks. Because, if people are driving to their jobs and you're disrupting their ability to drive to their jobs, Presumably you don't have a job because you'd be driving to work. Buenos Aires Times says, in remarks delivered on the eve of the first big protest of Malay's presidency, Human Capital Minister Sandra Pellaveo said in a broadcast that picketers who attempt to block roads would be stripped of government support. She said the only people who will not receive welfare and aid are those who go to the march and cut the street. Now, Argentina has a large number of social welfare plans. Some of these, it says, are paid directly into the beneficiary's bank account or via, a food stamp card. Others are received through payments from social welfare organizations and NGOs. The world, just pays their bills, essentially, to some extent. But if you're one of these individuals who wants to damage the country, if you're one of these leftists who Malay is very much against, and you might have seen the video of Malay holding this big stick and threatening communists recently. If you're one of those individuals, well, you might just lose your government check, and you might just lose the ability to live off the government if you choose to carry out those actions. This is in Argentina. We'll see if it's replicated anywhere else, but it is an interesting proposition at the very least. All right, folks, that said, let's jump into some questions. Let's see here. All right. First off, from Chris Leons, you're saying, how could this happen and not be challenged by Republican politicians? Are Republicans working for the Democrat Party? Are Republicans also controlled by the CIA? Are Republicans simply weak and asleep at the switch? Presumably you're talking about the combination of the many cases, including the efforts to take Trump off the ballot. I think there's two sides to the Republicans. You have the RNC, the Republican National Committee, which is not necessarily, pro-Trump. The RNC, I'd say, is actually relatively anti-Trump. Again, there's been a fundamental shift in the nature of America's two-party system. The Republicans these days are no longer the Republicans they once were, and the Democrat Party of today is no longer the Democrat Party of yesterday. You've seen emerging of the Bush-era Republicans into the Democrat Party. The Democrat Party has become essentially just the establishment party. It's the old guard. It's the globalists. It's the kind of the two-party system combined into one. And then you have the Republican Party that has become more of a populist party. It has fundamentally changed because of Trump, and they very much dislike Trump because of that. Now, a lot of the Reagan-era Republicans and a lot of the more old-school Republicans, a lot of them don't like Trump for doing that. A lot of them seriously dislike him. But I think because they recognize that Trump is, doing better than anybody at the polls, if you took every other candidate on the Republican side and combined them all together, based on polling, they would still not be able to beat Trump. And so the Republicans, at least in their views, are kind of forced to get behind Donald Trump. Now, they were viewing Trump, I think, as a temporary disruption to the old system of government we had. Two-party system. You have the pro-corporate and pro-war party, and then you have the pro-union and pro-socialist party. And that's I think the old system was less socialist, but I think it's become much more of that, arguably, right? And of course, that was the system America had for a very long time. The left now, because the establishment has been mashed into it, now contends between the very far left, the communists and the socialists, the Democratic Socialists of America and so on, existing mostly at the grassroots level, the ironically corporatists and technocrats and so on wanting to use the corporate system, and I'd say ironically the fascists who want to have the government control the corporate system to enact policies that bypass the Constitution. They become a very odd party. There are still elements of that in the Republican Party, although not as much. And of course, now I think the playing out of that scene is the battle between Trump and the RNC. And especially now Trump and the other political candidates, DeSantis and Nikki Haley and so on like that. I think there's a fight over, the soul of the nation, as Biden keeps putting it. Within the Republican Party, I do think that if Trump does not run again, or even 4 years from now, there's a very real possibility that the party could go back to the old school party, and the Nikki Haley's and the maybe the Ron DeSantis types, they're going to become more of the normal party again. The issue they're going to face is that the spirit of the American people and the American voter has changed. The American voter now demands something that the party as it exists no longer provides. And so they've had to change a lot. This is why you see the Freedom Caucus coming about, and this is why you see that more populist type form of government in form of candidates and so on really coming up. And you see a lot of new people, a lot of new faces entering politics, or some of the existing party members changing their stance to be more populistic. I think there's going to be a long-term battle between these kind of conflicting ideologies among Republicans, but I'd say that's also why you have some Republicans even supporting these actions against Trump. You do have a lot of them who are not coming out to criticize it. Seymour Butts, you're saying, good to see you again, Seymour. You're saying if we elect Trump because he is going to drain the swamp, then why don't they get the idea that we want the swamp drained? Yeah. Well, some people would argue that the swamp was drained and all the swamp creatures were no longer under the water, and the American people saw all the swamp creatures for what they were. And the swamp creatures are now in the open, basically carrying out the things they used to do in the shadows. The efforts to push Donald Trump off the ballot, the very radical policies now being enacted, the destruction of our police system, the destruction of our borders. You could say that maybe these factors always existed in America. Maybe these agendas were always there, but a lot of the public was blind to it. The public now sees these things taking place. And I think the issue now, and I think this is what Trump is kind of campaigning on for 2024, the swamp was drained. You're seeing all the stuff that was under the water, and now he wants to come in and just kind of purge the system. That ties into Trump's 2025 agenda, which the Heritage Foundation is mostly writing, where they have a government in waiting, ready to just change our government fundamentally. And as part of that, they're even talking about Trump possibly activating military courts and so on to be able to prosecute some of these people, because the court system, in their eyes, has been weaponized. If Trump comes back into office, you're gonna watch not only, I'd say the swamp has been drained, which is why we're seeing things in plain as day now. But the efforts to remove some of that corruption, that's what Trump's promising for 2024. And of course, a lot of people on the left and even some of the old school Republicans, the interesting claim they have is that they never represented the type of kind of crazy actions you're seeing. But the threat of Donald Trump to democracy itself necessitated them to take the actions they have. And they're accusing Trump of essentially baiting them into that process. It's a very strange argument. I would have never done this had he not instigated me, is the argument they have. Agree with it or disagree with it. That's kind of where the country is right now. Bambi Kogan, you're saying left, Dems, and MSM, mainstream media, have been hell-bent on brainwashing USA for 8 years, and common sense has tried to prevail. Has anyone ever felt more stupid, blind, or deaf? Yeah. We are swamped with, didn't see here, feel or experience that. We, the left, said no. Hell no. Yeah. Without a doubt, there's been a fundamental change, not only in the government, but also in the media. And, I think also before, Donald Trump, I think people had the perception that CNN was ironically a moderate media. Fox News was the Republican media. You might have NBC on more the far left. And there were a lot of different opinionated leftist sites that were kind of the avant-garde of, the future of the world. You then had all these, crazy conspiracy theorists on YouTube and so on, who were mostly written off by the establishment as just, noise in the background. What happened, though, there was a fundamental shift in the media sphere that happened, very interestingly, around the time of the 2016 elections. Because after Donald Trump won, the media took a second look. Remember, New York Times had articles saying, how did we get it so wrong? Because some of the polling had Donald Trump at 2% probability of winning. They didn't think Donald Trump had any chance in the world of winning the elections in 2016. Remember, Time magazine had printed out all of their, magazines where Hillary Clinton had won the election. A lot of the media had their articles prepared that Hillary Clinton won because they didn't think it was possible whatsoever. No chance at all that Donald Trump could have won. None of the polling said it. None of their data showed it. It was impossible as far as they were concerned. You might remember even South Park, they had to rapidly make a new episode where, Donald Trump won because they believed Hillary Clinton would win, and it was just unthinkable that Trump would win. Afterwards, there was a brief reflection on the left, or I'd say among the establishment, not even on the left per se, where they said, how did we get things so wrong? What did we miss? What do we not understand about this country and this country's voters? That the entire system that informs the American public, just about every single mainstream media news outlet, every single TV show, every talk show, every, sitcom even, they were all demonizing Trump, making Trump out to be this crazy threat to the American system of government, that he was a criminal, that he was working with Russia, that he hacked Clinton's emails. They came out with everything. All the systems that normally would inform the American voters had a singular focus and a singular narrative, and they couldn't imagine that the American people would simply not believe it. And so the question came out afterwards of, well, if the American people no longer believe the mainstream media, they no longer believe the government, because remember the Obama administration was even criticizing Trump, they no longer believe the claims of the legal system, where are they getting their information from that would make them question the integrity and basic honesty of everything that they believed controlled the country? All the actors, all the musicians, all the influencers, everything that they thought held control over the psyche of the American voters. People did not believe it. And so where were people getting their information? And then after that brief reflection on, the soul of the media, where they said, how do we get things so wrong? They changed the narrative and said, we didn't get things wrong. The American people have been misinformed by conspiracy theorists and social media and their friends, and they're getting false information. And so the move very quickly after that was a massive purge of YouTube influencers, the mass censorship of Twitter and Facebook and everything like that, and this huge attack on all the independent media, the radio hosts, anybody who had stood against the establishment. And look back to 2016. How many YouTubers did you follow who got booted off of YouTube? We're on YouTube now, but we're censored, folks. How many radio hosts did you listen to who got booted? How many, frankly, TV talk show hosts that you used to watch are no longer at those networks? There was a purge of all these people. And that was the answer that the establishment, not even the left, but the establishment came up with to try to make sure that the Trump phenomena of 2016 never happened again. Because they wanted to recapture the ability to inform the American public. And they said it's a danger to democracy. It is a threat of foreign disinformation and misinformation, of dangerous conspiracy theories, of malinformation, malicious information that is, disrupting this country and that has become a threat to the basic fabric of our country. That was the narrative. And so, the interesting thing now is that, ironically, they've never been able to reestablish control of the American psyche. A lot of people, I think, because, especially through the Trump administration, especially afterwards, I'd say the censorship establishment has had an opposite effect in many regards. And not only that, but a lot of the independent journalists who were censored, booted off social media and everything else, they began planting the seeds. I think we're at the beginning stages of this, planting the seeds of independent media that are sustainable outside the media establishment. You know, you watching Crossroads right now, it's a perfect example of that. You know, we're on Epoch TV. We're still on YouTube, even though they froze our growth and they kicked us off the ad system. We've been able to sustain ourselves because we started our own, our own media company, Epoch TV, which allows us to have our own shows, our own documentaries, our own special features financed by subscribers. And so a lot of media did this. Daily Wire did Daily Wire Plus. You had Tucker Carlson jump over to X. Elon Musk bought up Twitter and changed it to X. A lot of people have found alternative ways of informing the public. And I think this now has caused this rift in the country, and especially a very big, I think, issue of concern for the establishment, because they're now questioning, not only do they realize that they're going to lose their authority and lose their control over the minds of the public, but the efforts to censor that, the efforts to crush that, have been undermined through the use of the free market. And this is also why I think you have the European Union desperately trying to censor even foreign, websites and foreign media and so on like that. They're trying to go after Elon Musk right now, who operates a company in the United States. And so there's a global shift taking place. The populist ideas and the disruption of the establishment control over, the global system that they've created. It's a global issue. This is not just in the United States. We don't think of it like this, but this is almost on par with the effect of the American Revolution back in 1776. You had this system come about that was experimental, the American, republic, the representative democracy. And the kings of Europe, kind of turned their noses up. Poof, what is this? What is this rabble? You know what I mean? A lot of them understood that there was a shift taking place politically in the world. A question of, can government exist without kings and without, a monarch, of course, right? The American idea was an experiment on that. And the Americans not only showed that, yeah, you can do it, but it's actually more effective. It creates a more prosperous society. It's better for the economy. And if you give people freedom and the ability to, live their lives and pursue their dreams, well, you know what? It creates a very good way of life. And the whole world started demanding what America had. America then came out with different accords that would only even recognize governments as being official if they had, democracy or elections or the American system of being a republic. And so that shift took place globally, starting from within the United States. I would say the new shift taking place is very similar to that, but it is the average American citizen waking up and choosing for themselves to not believe the system they have been fed. And that waking up of the average citizen, is toppling what has become the new monarchy, the new two-party system, the new tyrants and the new system of control that has established a top-down system rather than a bottom-up system, which America always represented. It's almost like the renewal, the great renewal of the American, idea taking place now in a way that is causing the same kind of disruption that we had in 1776. That's at least how I see it. Another question from JA2559088. You're saying, we are a constitutional republic, but if people want to keep calling it democracy, it never was. We are a constitutional republic. 100% accurate. A republic technically is what's called a representative democracy. And that means that we elect people to engage, to represent us, to engage in the democratic process. We don't vote on, the American citizen doesn't vote on every bill. The American citizen doesn't vote on every single law. And it's not like, if you don't show up in Congress today and, vote for something like that, because again, that would be like a direct democracy that anything can happen. The idea of the American Republic is based on the Roman Republic, which required the existence of a Senate. This is as opposed to the Greek democracy, which was direct democracy. And so a republic it's again representative democracy. You could argue there's still a democratic process to it. But it's true, one of the issues we face is if we stop calling America a republic and start calling it a democracy, it does confuse the idea of what we are as a country. The founding fathers were very, very, very against the ideas of democracy. In fact, if you read George Washington's letters, there's some really interesting letters George Washington has. One of the funniest ones that actually ties into the arguments of democracy was an exchange he had, ironically, about the Illuminati. Because, remember at the time, the Illuminati was a real organization. The Illuminati of Bavaria had enacted a policy where they were trying to overthrow the kings and the religions of Europe. And you had, prior to that even, the Rosicrucians, who were ideological opponents of the Illuminists. The Rosicrucians were also issuing documents throughout, close to 200 years, saying they were also going to overthrow the kings and the religions of Europe. Now, Washington was warned against the existence of the Illuminists. Again, Adam Weishaupt, the Illuminati of Bavaria, enacted this whole plan, and when they were they infiltrated the Mason lodges. They were in the Grand Orient and the English Lodge. No, sorry, they were in the Grand Orient and the Scottish Rite. The English Lodge was the one that existed in America, and George Washington in his letters argued that, that groups had not yet been found in the United States. But Washington in his letters said that he believed that the same system existed, but in America it was not in the, Mason lodges. I'm not being conspiratorial here. These are George Washington's actual letters. George Washington said that he believed that movement to overthrow the kings and the religions of Europe and the Illuminist idea existed in the Democrat societies. The Democratic societies were the Democrat Party later on. And when George Washington personally led the National Army to put down the Whiskey Rebellion, George Washington argued that the Whiskey Rebellion had been started by those organizations. The idea of democracy, again, was against the idea of the American Republic, and the Democrat societies were regarded as an anti-constitution organization. They did not believe in the American Constitution. They did not believe in the idea of the American Republic. They wanted direct democracy. And that kind of direct democracy was seen by the Founding Fathers as the first stage of tyranny, the first stage of a collapse of a republic, which would then lead to a dictatorship. And so it's very interesting if you get into these old arguments. Democracy and even what led to the Democrat Party, again, the democratic societies, were regarded as a threat to the fabric of the nation by George Washington. Now, of course, the Republican Party itself came about much later, around the time of, mid-1800s, about, 4 or 5 years before Abraham Lincoln. It was kind of the anti-slavery party at the time. If you read the history of the Democrat societies, they've rebranded it now as the Democrat Republican societies, where they claim that both the Democrat Party and the Republican Party are rooted in the Democrat societies that Washington warned about. And because of that, the narrative of George Washington's letters have been rebranded as his concerns against, a party-based political system. That's actually not accurate. Nowhere in his letters does he talk about the Democrat-Republican societies. America is a republic, has always been a republic. And the Founding Fathers viewed the anti-Republican ideas as being a threat against the American system itself. And that's, again, where it gets complicated, right? Anyways, fully agreed, we are a constitutional republic and not a democracy. I actually did a special feature on this, which you can watch. What was it called again? I did a special feature. It was called America Rewritten. Sorry. So if you want to watch my special feature on the American Republic and the concerns of the Founding Fathers about what a democracy is and why we're not a democracy, you can find my special feature on Epoch TV, epochtv.com. It's called America Rewritten. And I have a lot of this history in there that I think is fundamental to understanding the system of government we have, if we want to keep it. Vicky, you're saying, how much of this change/shift away from traditional values and the media gaslighting America is attributable to the CCP? It's debatable. I would say that the world has been dealing with a moral conflict for a very long time. This ties into something a lot deeper. Now, on one side of it, you could argue that without a doubt, the Soviet Union, through its policies of, active measures or subversion, were also trying to destroy the cultural fabric of the United States. That's been something happening for a very long time. You can watch a video from Yuri Bezmenov, former Soviet, propagandist who defected to the West. He also wrote a book under the name Thomas Schulman called Love Letter to America, which I recommend. But Soviet active measures looked to attack the pillars of a civilization, the religious sector, the law and order, the political integrity, and so on. And by destroying the different pillars of a society, social harmony, family relations, and so on, you tear down the society. Communism has been trying to enact these policies since at least the mid-1700s. Debatably even earlier than that, if you want to go back to the older, forms of it, right? The first communist was in the Cercle Social of the, which was one of the main organizations that led to the French Revolution. There was an individual they called him the Rousseau of the gutter. He was also called the pornographer, who is considered the first revolutionary the first communist. Francois Noël Gracchus Babeuf would be considered the first revolutionary communist, also an actor within the French Revolution, who then whose ideas played a main role in the formation of the League of Outlaws and the League of the Just, which led, of course, to the communist leagues where Marx and Engels wrote the Communist Manifesto. Brief history on that. I did another special feature on all this. It was a series called The Dark Origins of Communism, if you're interested. Now, the assault on morality has been a very long debate in the West, though. And a lot of this came about during the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment was an attack, on kind of the religious ideas that had defined much of the human world. And there was kind of an anti-moral movement. A lot of the individuals were naturists or, Satanists. And the argument they had was that, well, if God created everything, then everything is of God, therefore human nature is of God, and therefore if you restrain human nature, you're going against God. You have groups that believe this. It's actually a very evil idea. And so it inverts the concept of morality. In other words, a lot of communist ideas are rooted in this, especially in the French Revolution, by the way. The ideas of naturism hold that morality is evil because they believe that morality and religion suppresses human nature, and that if you believe that people are created in the image of God, then human nature is of God. It's one of the two schools of the satanic ideas, which, again, naturism, and then there's also the ideas of God himself is evil, where they come up with the concept of the demiurge and so on. If you read the history of communism, it actually ties into all this stuff, which is why I'm talking about it. The Enlightenment was heavily defined by these two ideas, these anti-religious concepts. And there was a big debate starting up with the rise of atheism and the coming about of Darwin and social Darwinism and all this stuff, and the belief in the progress of man, of what is the future of humanity and what is human morality if God is cast out of the picture. But a shift took place in the world. In Europe and in a lot of countries, you had the moving away from religion. The Enlightenment represented that. The French Revolution was an outcropping of that, where they destroyed not only the kings of Europe, but also the religions. In America, we had a very different approach. In America, while the rest of the world was having the Enlightenment, we had the Great Awakening. We had the great revivals and so on, where Americans moved back to religion while Europe moved away from religion. And you can see the existence of the socialist movements rooted in the French Revolution and the American system rooted in the American Revolution, representing the outcropping of these two ideas. And the battle we've had ideologically between America and the concept of freedom and basic, human rights and so on, versus the socialist and tyrannical ideas that have defined, at least the last 100 years, I'd say maybe the last couple 100 years of our world, are results of this debate we've been having. As a world, we've been having this debate. What is morality? And the assaults on the concepts of morality. And also religion. What is the place of religion in the world, and is it good for humanity? And again, if you want to know why communists always try to destroy religion, that's why, of course. This I would say is the real battle we've been having in our society today, in the world for, again, I'd argue at least since the 1600s, actually, if you want to trace it back to its origin. Maybe even the 1500s, you want to go to like older interpretations of it. But, without understanding the history of these things, it's actually really difficult to understand what's happening in the world. And the debates we're having around tradition and morality, really. I could go into this for a very long time, but we're getting late in the day, folks, so I'll end it here. Let's see here. Real quick, tonight we're going to have a special feature airing. You might remember I was in South Korea doing some reporting. I'm going to have a few special reports on that. I've already had one. The next one is airing tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, on the CCP's Hidden Hand, and stay tuned for some more research where I've actually been investigating some of the CCP's front operations there. We'll be detailing some of that in the future, hopefully very soon. But in the meantime, we have a very good special feature talking about how the CCP uses a lot of its systems to control organizations and how that system works. That special feature is going to be airing tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, so don't miss it. And folks, that said, let's see. Oh, it's free for everyone to watch. So if you're on YouTube, Twitter, Rumble, Facebook, you don't need a subscription to watch that special feature. But it's going to be only on Epoch TV, epochtv.com. So head over tonight, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and let me know what you think. All right, folks, that said, thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate all of you. I hope you had a wonderful Christmas, and I hope we all have a wonderful New Year coming up very soon. Thank you very much. And as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.